Imagine the splendor of Rome at its zenith, marble temples gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, legions of disciplined warriors defending an empire stretching from Britannia to Egypt, and a society that seemed invincible, sculpted by centuries of conquests and wealth. Yet, it was within this fortress of civilization that a singular force of chaos emerged, an emperor whose reign was so shockingly erratic and deranged that it left even his most loyal subjects questioning reality itself. This is the story of Caligula, a man who, upon ascending to the throne, became the very embodiment of power gone mad. Our tale begins in the year 37 AD, a year of both relief and renewed hope for the Roman people. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, affectionately called Caligula, had been proclaimed emperor after the long and joyless reign of his great-uncle Tiberius. Caligula, which means little boots, was a nickname from his childhood when he had accompanied his father, Germanicus, on military campaigns, dressed in miniature soldier's gear. Germanicus was a beloved hero of Rome, a figure of both military brilliance and moral integrity, and Caligula inherited a legacy that stirred great expectations. The Roman people adored him, and his ascent to power was met with celebration and jubilant processions. He was the young, charismatic leader they had prayed for, someone who promised to revitalize the glory of Rome. His first months in power lived up to this promise. Caligula opened the treasury, giving lavish gifts to the public and the Praetorian Guard. He honored the memories of his family, many of whom had fallen victim to the paranoia of Tiberius, and generously rewarded loyal senators. Magnificent games and festivals lit up the city, and Rome seemed to be in the midst of a rebirth. But hope is a fragile thing, and darkness lurked just beneath the surface. A few months into his reign, Caligula fell terribly ill. He was stricken with a fever so intense that the entire empire held its breath, believing their young emperor might die. Prayers were offered, temples filled with incense, and sacrifices made to the gods. When Caligula finally emerged from his illness, it was as if a shadow had overtaken him. The vibrant, hopeful leader had been replaced by someone cruel, capricious, and deeply deranged. Historians still debate what happened during that illness. Did a physical malady scar his brain, or did the brush with death fracture his sanity? Regardless of the cause, the change was unmistakable. The emperor who had once inspired so much joy now seemed to derive pleasure from spreading fear. One of Caligula's first acts after his recovery was to demand divine honors. Not content with mere mortal adulation, he ordered that statues of himself be erected in temples across the empire. To the horror of the Jewish population in Judea, he commanded that his image be placed in the sacred temple of Jerusalem, a desecration that nearly led to armed revolt. Only the diplomatic efforts of his advisor, Publius Petronius, and the intervention of the emperor's assassination prevented a full-blown crisis. Meanwhile, Caligula's behavior grew more bizarre by the day. He surrounded himself with sycophants who were terrified to contradict him, fearing that any hint of disobedience would lead to death. In the Senate, the once respected body of Roman governance, senators were treated like buffoons. Caligula delighted in humiliating these powerful men, sometimes forcing them to run alongside his chariot like common slaves, or making them dance and perform degrading acts at banquets. His court became a twisted theater of cruelty, a spectacle where power was wielded like a blunt instrument, smashing down the pride of Rome's elite. The emperor's cruelty extended far beyond mere humiliation. He was obsessed with gladiatorial games, but not the carefully regulated contests that the public adored. Caligula reveled in the most brutal displays, and he often commanded that random members of the audience be thrown into the arena to be torn apart by wild beasts. There was a dark, almost childlike glee in his actions, as if he viewed human life as a toy he could break whenever he pleased. His love of spectacle knew no bounds, and he drained the imperial treasury with reckless abandon. The coffers, once full from Tiberius's frugal rule, emptied as Caligula funded extravagant building projects and hosted feasts of unimaginable excess. One of the most infamous stories from his reign involves his love for his horse, Incitatus. Caligula's obsession with incitatus was almost comically absurd, yet it hinted at a deeper and more dangerous instability. The emperor built a marble stable for his horse, complete with jeweled harnesses, and a dining hall where incitatus was fed oats mixed with gold flakes. He invited Rome's elite to banquets hosted by the horse, and, in a gesture of supreme mockery, he announced his plan to make incitatus a consul. Whether this was meant as a serious political statement or a means of humiliating the Senate, the message was clear: Caligula saw no difference between a Roman statesman and an animal. But Caligula's most bizarre antics came when he decided to wage war on the god Neptune. In a campaign that defied all logic, he marched his legions to the shores of the English Channel, supposedly to invade Britannia. Once there, he ordered his soldiers to draw their swords and slash at the waves. They hurled spears into the sea, and when Caligula was satisfied with his victory, he commanded his troops to collect seashells as trophies, calling them the spoils of war. This absurdity was more than just an odd story, it revealed an emperor whose grasp on reality had utterly slipped away. Even in the heart of Rome, Caligula was a figure of dread. Rumors spread of secret tunnels beneath the city, where he could move unseen, spying on his subjects or sneaking into people's homes to terrify them. His paranoia was legendary. Believing that plots lurked around every corner, he began accusing even his closest allies of treason. Trials were held in which the outcome was predetermined, and executioners worked tirelessly, carrying out the emperor's endless orders for death. It was this climate of fear and distrust that led to the inevitable. The Praetorian Guard, who had once protected him, began to see the emperor as a threat to Rome itself. Cassius Chaerea, a high-ranking member of the Guard and a man who had suffered public humiliation at Caligula's hands, became the key conspirator. The plotters knew the risk: failing to kill the emperor would mean certain, excruciating death. Yet, their desperation had driven them beyond fear. On January 24, 41 AD, the conspirators struck. Caligula was making his way through a palace corridor when Chaerea and his fellow guardsmen attacked. The emperor fought back, screaming curses, but he was soon overwhelmed and stabbed repeatedly. The emperor's wife and infant daughter were also brutally murdered to prevent any heir from rising to power. In the aftermath, Rome erupted into chaos, with the Senate attempting to restore the old republic and the Praetorian Guard scrambling to maintain order. Caligula's body lay lifeless, his once mighty presence reduced to a bloody corpse. His reign of terror had ended, but the damage he had inflicted on Rome's spirit would linger for years. His name became synonymous with madness, a cautionary tale of what happens when one man wields absolute power without restraint. Even now, centuries later, we ponder the enigma of Caligula. Was he a tragic figure, broken by trauma and the isolation of power, or was he simply born a monster, his madness lying dormant until he became untouchable? And so, we leave you with this haunting question: was Caligula merely a victim of his circumstances, or was he destined from the start to become one of history's most infamous tyrants? Let us know your thoughts, and if this dive into the madness of ancient Rome gripped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more tales of the emperors and outlaws who shaped history.